with all your experiences working with Volvo, Ikea, Credit Suisse, shipping, major shipping companies, what convinced you on working with Concordium and getting into this blockchain sector?
Yeah, that was very interesting. I was first asked to be an advisor. I was working with Lars ever since 2015 as chairman of his Saxo Bank. Then he sold his shares to Geely. I'm, as you said, the vice chairman of Volvo Cars and also on the board of one of Geely's holding companies for their some of the international holdings. And having that background from both Credit Suisse and Handelsbanken, which is another systemic important bank in Sweden, he wanted to build a blockchain where you were already thinking about regulation would come into blockchain, and that background from me, and also my background with large corporations, so how to think strategically and new products, that brought me in as an advisor, but it was more or less immediately converted into a CEO because they were short of a CEO. I thought had no plans going really back to an operational function. On the other hand, it is so exciting, and since I knew nothing about it, I got so curious. How could large corporations coming with their Web2 platforms, how could they make use of Web3? And this is always the problem for incumbents. That is, what should I do? How should we implement these things? We've seen over and over again large corporations being totally wrapped out of a market because somebody came from about nothing. Just speaking in automotives about Tesla, and where they started in 2008, they couldn't even pay salaries. They had to pledge their houses, and here we see where they are today. And I remember the discussions in Volvo, but also amongst other car makers at that point in time. It was like, no, they will never make it. They don't know how to make a car, and here you are. So this was really why. That was, if you also are taking the charts and boards and with all the strategic planning and decisions for large corporations, you must know what is going on in new markets, and there's no better way to do it than really sticking your fingers into it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and yeah, that's great. Or it's always amazing to see how people get into the space and our different paths there. And yeah, I think it's one of those things where blockchain, it is really confusing at first. It's something like I sometimes think of it as riding a bike, right? At first, it seems really difficult. You probably fall a few times, but then it's just something when you get into the rhythm, right? You see how it flows, and you realize how easy it is. And I think a lot of people are kind of afraid of that, They're afraid of what's new, and they don't realize that they can implement this in so many different factors, right? Whether it's a small company or a larger company, or on a personal level. So what major companies right now do you see that would be a really good fit for implementing, whether it's CCD or Concordium or just blockchain in general? We hear some companies that are starting to dip their toes here and there, but which major companies right now do you think could be a really good fit?
A lot have, and I think that's the first one for large corporations to figure out what is permission blockchain, which a lot have been looking at, maybe because they already have some of these platforms or IT suites which could support that. But I'll leave that alone because I don't really see the benefit of that. But if you look at instead the permission less blockchain and public blockchain, this is really interesting because it can give large corporations, first of all, some total new thoughts about how do we interact with our customers, and you would stop calling them customers and maybe say your ecosystem instead. So that is number one, I think, to learn that you can interact in a total new way. And we all know if we drive in an Uber car and you have to rate the driver, but he'll also have to rate you. It gives a total other very healthy communication. And this is also what I think blockchain with your ecosystem and your community is giving. So that is number one, to learn to build and really treat your marketing in a new way. So marketing is no longer really marketing. It's just as much a business building and building cooperation with your ecosystem. So, and number two, see what, if we want to start on a very, say, easy way, what is it? Do we want to tokenize something? That can be for a gimmick interesting, but a lot of the jurisdiction doesn't really support it yet. With if you want to tokenize a car, you must naturally find out whether people then will actually get that ownership, or whether there are some vindication rules in your country where it wouldn't give the ownership of it anyway. So Luxembourg is a good example where they have started and are quite aggressive, and countries will follow, making sure that the underlying law is also supporting. But again, interesting platform for tokenization, where not only can you gain tokens by doing something, but you can also invest in the platform by buying these tokens. That's interesting concept. The other thing is everything around authentication. I think that's interesting. My daughter just got her diploma from her university, and that was blockchain based QR code, where you could literally go in and have it that it's validated. Yeah, we're working on that, and that is also one of the things you can do already now, is we have a function where you can just take any document and just have that validated with a hash function, and then later naturally prove that was the original document. So I'll see as a very easy feature. What we're doing for some now is to build that into some of these portals where you have your minutes of meetings. But I mean, if you years later have any legal case, or you want to prove that was the document that was taken to the minutes, it would be nice to have that immutable. So I think any of these DocuSign and what they are called of where you sign documents online, I think these would in very little time from now come with where you can just throw your document in and have it blockchain validated, because for yourself, that's a very easy security. What we also see are like service books, take EV cars now, where the battery is such a big part of the car's value. And if you can have already today, you have a lot of problems with when you buy a secondhand car. Is the mileage right, or has it been fibbled with? Because that's naturally a big part of the valuation of the car. And for a battery, it's quite important that you know, how has this battery been treated? Was it always, say, loaded the right way, i.e., for example, up to 80%, and or has the battery just been standing there for a long time with where it has been, say, charged for a long time without driving the car? Whatever would take a lot of value out of the car. And if you can get that blockchain-based service book, that would also be a fantastic thing. It could also be, if you want to have your bonds, if you issue bonds, green bonds for your company, that you want to tokenize them, and that would be much easier for retailers to buy into and co-finance, or even for smaller companies like SMEs, if you want to do a loan and tokenize it and get the community support to support you that way. So I think there's so many possibilities, and then I haven't even yet spoken about all the things NFTs can get you. For example, look at it from your marketing department, and you can wrap a lot of things into NFTs. That could be one thing. It could be like, if you again just stay with the car industry, you could wrap some designs into it. You could wrap some test driving, whatever you want to wrap into NFTs. And also eventually metaverse, where you can build on metaverse and buy NFTs and put your car or whatever it could. Also, I'm just using that as an example. So you could really take your marketing to gaming, but take the gaming to a sales platform where whatever you are building with your NFTs, you could buy in the real life. So I think where Web 2 meets Web 3, where it flows forth and back between also gamification of things, or just a demonstration of things in a total new way. You could put a test car up and see how is that accepted, and then you could produce it because it would have such a big traction in your game, for example. So I think there are so many possibilities, and then a lot of financial products also. And just to round it off, I also think it's really the future also for banks, because if you have a smart contract which is predefined, and that is really pre-validated also for all the compliance you need, then you know if you have transferred money via that smart contract, it is compliant. So you don't need afterwards to test. You could front load all the compliance to make sure that the two of us can only transfer money to each other via this smart contract, which have all the elements of being compliant, and then it's done with, and then later you can always validate it from an outside in, or the auditability is so easy. So I think these are all the things which are coming now. It's the companies who are most modern, and you must dare, like I dare say, without even being able to spell blockchain, I dare jumping into it, and I think that's what you must do. You must just do it. And we had a great team visiting us from Shell in Concordium, and there we had our student interns. They were doing the presentation. And it was marvelous. I was so proud of what they can do. So sometimes turn it upside down. It doesn't need to be like the highest ranking who are then doing this and that. It can be very often in this world. I think that is a big opportunity also in blockchain, that things are turned upside down. It's like that generation knowing most about it, being so innovative, borderless, etc. And I think that's marvelous.
Yes. I mean, to your point, there's just so many ways that it can be implemented, right? You've seen things with major companies, like you were talking about, big banks. And then there's also, I've seen children's books about blockchain, right? So that's helping people learn about a pretty valuable skill, which seems like it's going to be a part of all of our futures, just as we knew the internet eventually would. Blockchain is just, like you were saying, the smart contract element, that changes so much, right? I remember I was watching a documentary, and this was a documentary on blockchain in the food industry. And certain foods, people try to fake, right? They'll try to lie and say it's from this part of the world, or whatever it may be. And that's a big thing in certain foods. So, right, they were able to use blockchain tech. And to your point, they can tag everything. They can see, right, just like a car, how if they use blockchain, a car company, if they use blockchain technology in your example, they can tell how well that car was serviced, right? In the food industry, you can tell exactly where this was, how it was treated. If it's an animal, like they can verify if it was really free range, right? They can count how many steps the chicken took every single day. So it's really innovative, in so many different companies, and people can take on this technology. And so I know your background in banking as well. How soon do you see big companies taking on these decentralized financial and business models? And how soon do you see maybe tokenized bonds, equities, stocks? I know there's some banks talking about it. Bank of America has given out multiple reports on blockchain. So I guess it's on the horizon. But how soon do you see that coming to fruition?
I think it will start with the metaverse platforms. I think that's what we'll see quite soon. I think Blackrock is one of the biggest owners of land in metaverse. So I think that is coming, and that immediately also gives a lot of issues on kind of how to regulate that. If you spend a lot of time in metaverse, what rules are applying there and who is it? That whole part of identification and the soul-bound tokens, etc. So that is one part of Concordium we are working with, making sure that our ID is now developed. Here in the coming months, it will be not only being ID'd when you use a platform, so the two of us would know who am I dealing with, but also that you will have a lot of zero knowledge proof functions that I don't need to know your social security number if I just need to know whether you are under 25, for example. So all that is coming, and then later in the year it will be like really an extensive ID framework, where because that's the other problem, that you're often validating yourself with a Google email, etc. And do you really want to do that, or do you want to make sure that you know who is having what information about yourself? So that is what I really like about blockchain, is that this is so much putting power back to the individual, and you can then control your ID. You can have your soul-bound tokens. You can verify a lot. You could have a wallet where you have a lot of verification of various things based on blockchain, but you can always keep your privacy and just do the validation of a lot with the zero knowledge proof. So one example here under COVID, again back to my daughter, was in Scotland on her university, and she just had to show her identity card for so many things, and telephone number, because they wanted to be sure if you were infected that you could get hold of people. But that naturally immediately also led to a lot of abuse of people's identity. So there again, it would be so nice if you can just validate with privacy on it. So that is what we're coming with, which is super interesting, going back to the various use cases, where in all of them you want to use your identity, you want to prove that you're you. Our blockchain is kind of born also with that ability to, if you issue an NFT, that you don't need to do a lot of, say, marketing to make sure that people understand you had the original. You can do it via your ID. So it's really taking that dilemma away also. So I think identity is one big part of what is coming. But I want to go back to what you said about the food and validate that this food comes from here and there. That is another cool thing we're working on. That is, you could call it that you put a digital twin up, but that you put an NFT on everything, like
Interesting.
the tree still in the forest. And then that NFT would follow that tree into the sawmill, to the production, to the final product. Sorry. And that you can really put an NFT on everything and into an ESG platform. So the future could be that you have your own ESG platform, and you could really prove what am I doing good for the world in my entire, say, consumption. Because if every item had an NFT on it, then you can take that table over when you buy it from the producer, and then the CO2 footprint, etc., would sit in your platform. And then when you sell it again, or you throw it away or whatever, you can constantly monitorize not only companies' ESG, but also down to the private person. I think that is one thing which will come, that we'll be obliged and also really have an interest in, really making sure that what we do is also supporting and good for the planet. So this is another cool thing, I think, that you can make it much easier for people to do the whole ESG accounting, which today is a nightmare for any company, and avoid greenwashing, etc.
Definitely. Yeah. That's right. That key element of the smart contracts can just be used in so many different areas, right? And especially, I know Concordium, you guys have the identity layer while also being while having, right, know your customer and still being pseudonymous, right? So yeah, please tell us more about the CCD token, Concordium, and how you all differ from some of these other. There's a few layer one blockchains out there that are attempting to bring in kind of real world identification and whatnot. Yes, please tell us how you all differ in key elements of Concordium and CCD.
Yeah, so I think the difference with our blockchain, and we're actually next week coming with an interesting third-party report outside in due diligence of Concordium, because we wanted, and we had investors who also would like to see how is it you say you take science peer-reviewed papers for anything. All of our protocols are vested with that, including our identity protocol. And then we do a blue paper, and then we code it. And now we have also both our own internal validation hired in to validate that this is the way, and the security is fine, and it's to these high cryptographic standards, which was already developed in the science protocols. And now we had IFICO, a W3L, also making that report and validating. So it is literally, in their words, one of the world's best platforms, because most blockchain, and I think that's very good when you want to be fast and innovative, that you do things via a synchroning process. So you test and try. Like if we were going to fly at Dragon this afternoon, we could play with it. We could try, this works. We put it up, it falls down, we test and try. It's just if you want to have a blockchain, and you also want, so for a financial institution or whatever value you put in to the blockchain, you can't test and try. You want to make sure that this is actually working. You have seen so many protocols failing, so many backdoors, so many problems. And this is what we are avoiding by having this scientific approach. And when it also comes down to smart contracts, we do, where it's ever possible, to do formal verification of elements of the smart contract. So I think that is one thing where we differ, that we have said that is a prerequisite for large corporations to use it, that it is a technology where you don't are embarrassed by the whole thing disappearing or breaking down. And we have seen some awful examples just in recent weeks and months. So that is number one. And number two is that you cannot use our blockchain if you're not identified. So that should really be a customer benefit or user benefit, that you know that comes with everything, but also for the regulator at the end of the day, if they want to and have a court order and want to disclose who have done what at what point in time, they are able to get that from third parties. So that's another thing that we say, that we are easing the regulatory compliance. So that is another feature. But I think the most important with our idea is that it's giving so many benefits for the user. With the versions I said, now we come with extended possibilities where you can use the zero knowledge proof functions, and then the soul bound token model, which is coming with our extended ID framework. That gives a user so many benefits, and you can use it for so many things. So in itself, ID as a service is one facility you can get on Concordium, which also can benefit other blockchains, that they can tap into this and use Concordium for that part. because at the end of the day, I think we want a world where you are responsible, but where you also can prove ownership. You want to be sure, because sometimes I was just reading the latest articles about just the issues around using stable coins and how on a bridge and what problems it can really give. So in one way, you are right that things are super easy. On the other hand, they're also super complicated, because do you really want to entrust a lot of things to something you don't know, either because you have a centralized bridge, or if you have a decentralized, you must be sure that things are coded the right way. If you have a centralized bridge, you must suddenly trust an intermediator, and wasn't that why you wanted to have blockchain in the first place, was to avoid intermediators? So it's not trivial things, which also makes it very interesting, but also necessitates that you work closely with people from the scientific world on everything, and that is what we do.
Definitely. Yeah, I think your approach is really, it gets to what the essence of blockchain is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be decentralized, right? It's supposed to be inclusive. Anybody's supposed to use it. But I think what really started was it's also supposed to be secure, right? We get into the blockchain space because, right, we don't like having to go through a middle person, but we also are here because we want the security of it. And obviously, with a lot of innovation, some of the bad actors, that's what we've been seeing, unfortunately, really pop up in these last couple, obviously this bear market that we're seeing too many companies go down. So do you think, I know you hinted at this, do you think some of these platforms, other blockchains, they would have not run into as many problems if they were using CCD or in the Concordium?
Yeah, I think our for sure, our platform, this is also what the due diligence report shows, is this is much more secure blockchain than what you generally see in the market, because it is done from science. And there are many other things than just the consensus protocols. We have finalization, which means that you have immediate finalization of your transactions. It's very few blockchains who have that. So if you don't have it, like Ethereum, that is a probabilistic blockchain. That means that maybe it won't roll back, but there's no guarantee that it doesn't roll back. When you have finalization like we have, a deterministic blockchain, it's finalized, it's done when it's done, so it can't roll back. And so you go down to a layer where most people are not aware, and they only becomes aware when you have problems. And we were kind of putting it the other way around to say we have officially a partnership with ETH, which is absolute the best cryptographic university in the world, and as well as Aarhus University, who also one of the best in the world with a very long tradition. So we have more than 70 science papers, and we're taking elements from these, converting that into the coding, as I said. So it sounds super boring because things goes more slow. It's very easy to do something with the synchroning process we were discussing before, but then you don't know. And in science, you say when things breaks down, then you must really find out why and redo it. You can't just move on the same way you would if you have built something on a consensus protocol and it fails. You will dismiss that protocol. But this is not what people are doing. They're so proud that they get things up running again after so many hours. And so it's simply just because people don't know enough about it. I think that is one thing which will literally change with large cap coming in, because they would look at, and they're very used to from their IT suites also, to look at what kind of certification are there, etc. So they would also be able to ask the right question. So it's still very much in its infancy, but we also know from the history of the internet where things started, where you could hardly even up in the 90s, it was difficult to even understand what you should use it for. And now, like 60% plus of the world's population use the internet constantly. So exactly the same with blockchain. Did we have this discussion just last year? We wouldn't have discussed all the opportunity you could use it for at that point in time. So it's so exciting.
Definitely. And well, last question before I thank you again for taking your time to be with us today. But yeah, one last question before you go. It all comes down to education, right? I think that's the biggest thing in this whole space and for people getting into it. So please tell us about the Concordium Community Endowment Program, and also the potential that you see for blockchain, maybe in the NGO space and the nonprofit space.
Yeah, so it's all about, yes, the education, and now we have with the upgrade we just had here last month, we're now able to build use cases on our blockchain. It's a quite new blockchain. We will have some hackathons in the autumn, so we'll have 2 hopefully exciting hackathons in the autumn. We really are looking into now the whole documentation to make it super easy. The vision is to have this very low code, no code element where you could just say draw something together and have your standard smart contracts, etc. So I think we will also help a lot on that side to make it easy to use the blockchain. Then I think it is. Again, we are coding everything. We are using Rust, which is again a very high-level language in terms of security and making sure that things will become robust. And at the same time, it's also a language which doesn't use so much energy. So we constantly have that sorted in. We are very green blockchain. All our servers with the foundation tokens are on green energy, and everything we do we monitor that way, and we'll also have an ESG certification. So I think the education is in many elements. It's both on what is it you should look out for when electing a blockchain. These elements I said, is it a deterministic blockchain? Is it proof of stake, which is low energy, and even behind what servers are people using, even if it's proof of stake, low energy. We have very low and stable prices because our gas prices is pegged to the euro. So even though you pay it in CCD, you know beforehand what it is, so it doesn't come up and down. And this is one of the reasons why people need stablecoin also, just to pay the transaction costs. But here the transaction costs are low and stable, and then the ID. So that part of the education, to say why we have 5 minutes tutorials on our YouTube channel, where we tell why science matters, and that is a big part of the education, to say how should you at all choose a blockchain, what is it you should watch out for. And the next chapter is why governance matter, because that's also something. It's just not to decentralize everything. How are you decentralizing? Because otherwise you will really make some fatal and not redeemable problems when you decentralize. So that's the latest areas where we are applying science also. So hopefully from these 5 minutes videos, you can really understand a lot of what kind of considerations goes into what we are doing. And then the hackathons and tutorials for the developers is the next big element. So we hope that it is accessible and easy for people, and they will really start using Concordium now where it's ready.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I love the science-based element of it. Is, I mean, you're the first one I've heard of. I've been in crypto for a little while, so I know you guys are certainly unique, bridging the really bringing that governance, bringing the finalization element, right? Decentralized. Yeah, I love the Concordium community. I really look forward to seeing you all grow. And thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today, Lone.
Thank you. That was really a pleasure. Have a nice day.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.